Parkour! Parkour!
Parkour!
I'm right behind you, Andy! Come on!
Do it!
Yeah!
At this point, DICE has become a pretty well-known and notorious game company. Naturally, being a subsidiary of EA, they've been under a lot of scrutiny for releasing games in an unfinished and buggy state. And who can forget the whole Battlefront 2 star card situation? Easily the worst monetization system I think I've ever seen in a game. Their most recent flop was Battlefield 2142. No, 2040. That was the good one. Their most recent flop was Battlefield 2042. What should have been a relatively safe success for EA and DICE was ruined by their desire to make as much money as fast as humanly possible. It's become pretty clear in recent years that DICE has kind of lost the plot. But before Battlefield and Battlefront and you get the point. There was DICE's most ambitious game since pinball on the Sega Saturn. There was Mirror's Edge. Released in 2008, Mirror's Edge is a first-person, free-running parkour game. Kind of like a realistic platformer, Mirror's Edge innovated first-person movement in a way that I haven't seen in a game since. This is a game that was eons ahead of its time in so many different ways. Well, we did get a sequel in 2016. It wasn't as well received as the first game, despite apparently meeting sales targets. In recent years, it's become clear that DICE would rather focus on multiplayer games, as they're easier to monetize and make a continuous profit from. The last thing we really heard from DICE was that they have no time for other projects, as they're focusing on Battlefield 2042. Really? I think it's incredibly unlikely we'll ever see another Mirror's Edge again, which is honestly such a travesty. So, what is Mirror's Edge and what makes it so awesome? Most of Mirror's Edge takes place on the white rooftops of a heavily authoritarian and dystopian city. You'll be vaulting, wall running, and leaping across rooftops as you make it to your destination, or as you desperately try to escape the trigger-happy law enforcement. You play as a runner named Faith. Orphaned at a young age, she was adopted by a man named Merc and trained to become a runner. Runners are a part of an underground who help transport sensitive data while keeping it away from the prying eyes of the government. They risk their lives every day, living on the edge. The Mirror's Edge. I'm sorry. The story of this game is pretty engaging. It's essentially a murder mystery. One of the few non-corrupt government officials has been murdered, and that murder has been framed on Faith's sister, who's a police officer. After that, each mission is about finding and following different leads, working with crime bosses and police captains to uncover the real killer. While the plot isn't some out-of-this-world Oscars writing, it's interesting enough to keep me engaged. Cutscenes in this game are also so sick. Instead of being in-game or CGI, most cutscenes use a highly stylized 2D art style that looks amazing. This could seriously be a movie or TV show. It's that good. Outside of the story, within the gameplay is where this game really shines. As I said before, this game is a free-running parkour platformer with some combat elements as well. The campaign mode takes a pretty basic mission-by-mission approach, separated by cutscenes to progress the story. Levels are pretty linear. You follow one path pretty much the whole game, but the way you traverse each level is where you can really get creative. The moment-to-moment gameplay is seriously amazing here. It's probably one of the most fluid and in-depth parkour systems I've ever seen in a game. Everything from sprinting, vaulting, sliding, wall jumping, zip lining, wall running, and rolling to break a long fall feel incredibly fluid to do successfully. There's a real sensation of momentum you build up by continuously stringing together these moves. Coming back to the game, I was honestly so surprised by how well the gameplay still holds up. Controls are quite unique too. You use the left bumper for upward movements like jumping or climbing, and the left trigger for downwards movements like crouching or sliding. Right bumper will spin your character 180 degrees, which is essential to use for wall jumping. Right trigger acts as the attack button. When pressed alone, it acts as a punch, which unfortunately in this game feels like hitting someone with a pool noodle. It's slow and it doesn't really do much damage. But if you jump or slide then attack, you'll dish out a much more devastating kick, which does a lot more damage and feels way more satisfying. What's cool too is the more momentum you have while running, the more damage your kicks can do. If you're fast enough, you can just send enemies flying. With an appropriately timed press of the Y button, you can also disarm enemies and use their weapons against them, turning this game into a terrible first-person shooter. Seriously, gunplay in this game was clearly an afterthought. Guns have no kickback, no aim down sights, and if you're more than 10 meters away from an enemy, you won't be able to hit them really. That's fine though, as guns are meant to be kind of a last resort for Faith. For the most part though, you're supposed to run from the police as they overwhelm and surround you. I thought it was really unique for a first-person action game to mostly be about running away while actively avoiding combat. While that may sound boring on paper, in-game it's incredibly exhilarating. Being shot at as you full-on sprint away as this exciting chase music plays makes the game feel like kind of a movie. Jumping across huge gaps in buildings while being chased and shot at by a police helicopter as ground units try to cut you off and surround you is just so much fun. That is when you know where to go. A lot of times I found myself wondering where I was supposed to jump, and when you're also being chased and shot at, it feels all the more stressful. And it can be kind of frustrating after dying quite a few times, just because I didn't know where the game was trying to get me to go. Luckily, the game does its best to aid the navigationally challenged by highlighting certain objects to use in red, which helps the player progress. You can also press B to point the camera right to the objective, which is incredibly useful. In reality though, dying while trying to figure out how to make a certain jump is just part of the game. Checkpoints are very forgiving, so I never really felt like I was wasting a lot of time. But wow, falling in this game is incredibly visceral. You really feel yourself reaching terminal speeds as your vision cuts to black and you hear the horrifying squelch of your body hitting the pavement. But that just kind of adds to the excitement of every risky jump you take, knowing it might lead to a horrible death for your character. The camera bobs and shakes with each movement, making it incredibly immersive. It's like watching one of those GoPro parkour videos. All in all though, this is one of those games that are easy to pick up and play, but incredibly hard to master. And I don't think my gameplay will really do it much justice, to be honest. For 2008, I was also incredibly surprised by how well the graphics held up. Although at points it can be pretty piercingly bright with its overuse of bloom. While combat is kind of clunky, pretty much every other aspect of this game holds up and is still amazing. It's definitely a game you should play if you haven't already. We gotta bring this game to EA and DICE's attention again, because they have to make a new one. There's seriously nothing quite like it. I could go on and on about this game, but really, if this interests you at all, you should just go and experience it for yourself. You won't regret it. And that's about all I had to say, so if you like the video, like it, comment, hell, even subscribe if you want. Until next time, see ya. The campaign mode